This tutorial will be discussing the acid-base balance, and we will find that the majority of our metabolic reactions end up producing different kinds of acids. So that will definitely decrease the pH of the cells. So how is it that our body maintains a normal pH, which was between 7.35 and 7.45. So these are numbers that you want to be familiar with. Now, first, just a little going back to chemistry and defining what acids and bases were. So an acid is an electrolyte that one dissolves in water is going to ionize. It is going to release hydrogen ions, while a base is a substance that is going to release a hydroxyl group, which is the OH group, and that OH group can combine with a hydrogen ion, producing H2O or a water molecule. The more hydrogen ions that an acid can produce, that means that this acid is of strong acidity, and that would lead to a lower pH. So things that are acidic have a low pH, while things that are alkalinic or solutions that are alkalinic have a high pH. Hopefully you guys remember that the pH scale ranges from 0 to 14, and that the pH of 7, neutral, was distilled water. Our bodies is slightly on the alkalinic side, so our normal pH of our internal environment in the body is 7.35 to 7.45. And again, the main source of hydrogen ions in the body would be due to the metabolic reactions that occur in the body. So you can see here that pretty much burning any product in the body is going to end up producing some kind of acid. So for example, the aerobic respiration of glucose leads to the formation of carbonic acid, while the anaerobic respiration of glucose through glycolysis ends up making lactic acid. The incomplete oxidation of fatty acids that can occur, for example, in patients with uncontrolled diabetes would lead to ketone bodies, and these ketone bodies are acidic. The oxidation of amino acids that have sulfur in it will lead to the production of sulfuric acid, while the hydrolysis of phosphoproteins and nucleic acids will end up producing phosphoric acid. So again, different kinds of acids that are produced in our cells that should end up, so our bodies should end up actually having a very low pH. Some of these acids are very strong, but our normal pH again is on the alkalinic side. So how is it that our body is able to not only neutralize these hydrogens, it also switches our body to the alkalinic side. So we have different buffers in the body. We have a whole buffer system. There's a first line of buffering system, and if that doesn't help, then we would move on to the second line of buffers, and which we'll talk about in the next slide or two. So we want to talk about what is acidosis and alkalosis. These are two abnormal conditions of the body. So again, our normal pH range, 7.35 to 7.45, which is a very small range. And you can see here that the survival range of pH is between 6.8 to 8.0. Again, not a very wide window of survival range. So anything between 7.35 to 6.8 is considered acidosis, while an internal pH of 7.45 to 8.0 is considered that the body is going through alkalosis. And again, the body has to maintain a normal pH range in order to maintain normal body function. So these are the different buffers that I just mentioned, where again, despite all of that hydrogen that our cells are producing due to the burning of whether it's glucose or incomplete oxidation of fatty acids or the ones that we discussed in that previous slide, again, we are able to maintain an alkalinic level of pH due to a chemical buffering system, which is the fastest of these, and that is our first defense. And if that doesn't work and the body goes into a state of either acidosis or alkalosis, we can move on to these secondary methods to maintain pH balance, and that is the respiratory excretion of carbon dioxide. So we could change the levels or the rates of breathing. So if there is too much acid in the body, we can hyperventilate, and washing away a lot of carbon dioxide. And if you do not remember that relationship between carbon dioxide and hydrogen, a little hint would be that infamous equation that we mentioned several times, where carbon dioxide combines with water to make carbonic acid, and then carbonic acid breaks down to hydrogen ions, H and HCO3. So again, maybe something that you would want to go back and review in the respiratory system. So changing the rates of breathing and the depth of breathing, that can help either increase or decrease the amount of carbon dioxide being excreted. So the respiratory buffer takes a little bit of time, so it takes like about 1 to 3 minutes in order to for it to take effect. The third buffer is renal excretion of hydrogen ions. Okay, and this takes a couple of days until we could see an effect of that. So again, your very first one would be the chemical buffers that are found within the cells. That is pretty much instantaneous balance. Second would be the respiratory. That takes a couple of minutes. And then the renal buffer, that takes about a couple of days. Here you can see the time course of hydrogen ion regulation, so the chemical buffer system, and that again is your first line of defense against any shift in pH. There's several buffer systems in the cell, so we've got bicarbonate, phosphate, or protein buffer systems. And what those systems basically do with either, take a hydrogen ion or take a hydroxyl group to make sure that we're converting these strong acids or strong alkalis into weaker acids or weaker bases. And again, even if we haven't fully neutralized that strong base, at least these chemical buffers are able to change it from a strong acid to a weaker acid. Now, your second line of defense, these are what are known together as the physiological buffers. And the first or the fastest one of these two is the respiratory mechanism, where again, playing around with the rate of carbon dioxide excretion, you can either hyperventilate through tachypnea or decrease the ventilation process through bradycapnia. Now, the renal mechanism, that takes about 1 to 3 days until you could gets an effect. And it all depends on the renal excretion of hydrogen ions. So again, going back to chapter 20, we talked about how hydrogen ions can be secreted through a process known as tubular secretion of hydrogen ions, and when needed. So this is the when needed that we mentioned at the time. The next tutorial will discuss disorders in the acid-base balance.